So what we're going to do today is talk about how we were going to build software programs through Icon using the Automated Logic Southeast region standard logic symbols. So this is just one example. There's several different other ones we could go through. But what we're going to talk about today, we're going to use a VAV air handler as our example. So you'll want to have three things in front of you. You're going to want to have your Icon program open. You can either have it blank with no documents open, or you can have a blank document open. Either way, it doesn't matter. You'll also want to have access to the Southeast region standard logic symbols. So in this case, we are on the Southeast drive, the Y drive, some people call it. Under standards, software standards, currently we're making quite a bit of changes to it, so it's labeled as in progress. You'll go to the programming library and then building blocks, and you'll see there's a bunch of other ones in there being developed as well. So we're going to go to VAV air handlers. And what you'll want to do is you'll want to sort the logic symbols that are in that folder based on name, and the reason for that is they're labeled in such a way that this designator at the very beginning of the file name is there to help you order the logic symbols in the same way every time you build a program. And you'll see there's combinations of both letters and numbers. It's really just to make things appear in the order and group them together based on some of their functions. So as an example, you'll see incoming requests and run conditions are both labeled under B. They kind of go together, and then you also have two different options under C1, which is your fan, and then under C2, which is related to your fan, you'll have static pressure. So let me go through an example here. Our example drawing is going to be a pretty typical VAV air handler. It's got dampers for outside air, return air, and exhaust air, and they're all linked together with one signal through an economizer output. You have an outside airflow station. You have a single filter, a mixed air temp, a preheat coil with a discharge temperature, a freeze stat, a chill water coil, a discharge supply air temp on the unit, a high static shutdown, you got a couple smoke detectors in here. We're going to end up pulling them in as a single point. Then you'll also have a duct static pressure. We have a return fan and supply fan. So we're going to do some sort of flow or speed tracking, maybe even building pressure, but in this case you see we don't have building pressure shown on our drawing. We have return air temp and humidity, and then like I mentioned, the smoke detector there. So sequence is great. Of course, we want to go review the sequence, just to understand general control about this unit before we go diving into things, but we don't necessarily need that just to build our basic structure. So this is really kind of all we need for the basic structure. So going back into Icon, we'll pull up our logic symbols again, and we're going to kind of go down the list, and we're going to use the control button, and we're going to select all the options that apply for this unit going top to bottom. So we need a title block, we need incoming heat and cool requests, and we're going to use this one. It comes in default, has 40 slots for VAVs. If you needed more, you'd have to edit it. Then we're going to have our run condition section with all of our heat and cool requests coming in, HOA, for the unit. And then we're going to use a supply fan with a fault. And the reason we're not going to use this second one is that this one is kind of the same thing. The only real difference is it's using an analog input for the to monitor current to give us a status rather than a binary. So we're going to stick with the binary for now. We also have supply fan VFD static pressure control with optimized set point. We do not have any exhaust fan information, any components for exhaust fans, or we're not going to use the exhaust damper because it's going to be tied to the economizer. We do have a return fan with the same kind of options as the supply. We're not doing building static pressure control like I mentioned. We're not doing flow tracking because we don't have flow stations on the supply and return. So we'll just plan on doing speed tracking. Also, we got economizer options with mixed air temp, return air temp. We didn't have any CO2 overrides or return air CO2, so we'll leave that out. We did have an outside airflow control or an outside airflow station, so we'll assume we're doing some sort of minimum flow control there. we have a preheat, and this is broken up into a couple sections. You've got enable conditions, which will allow you the flexibility of swapping out the actual control section for the output. And I'll show you just a second with chill water how that works. But you've got your enable conditions, you've got your valve, and also your preheat discharge temp. Coming down to the cooling section, we have the same kind of thing, enable conditions, the valve, and you'll see here's your second option for your, if you had 4 stages of DX that you were controlling instead of a valve, you could use that option, but you'd use it coupled with the enable conditions. We don't have a cooling discharge temp because we're going to use the unit supply temperature as that point. We don't have a pump associated with it. We do want a supply temperature set point. We do want the matching supply temperature. We're going to do some sort of dehumidification control because we have a return humidity, so we'll need to add those in there. Whoops. Let's see. We don't have a humidifier, which means we also don't have supply humidity. We're not worried about any kind of enthalpy or heat wheels at this time. We have one filter. We don't have any kind of duct ionization or condensate drain pan. But we do have a freeze stat, a smoke detector, and emergency shutdown we'll throw in there as well. So once you've got all your options selected, you're going to go back to the top. You're going to click and hold, left click and hold, and drag it over icon. And you'll see that there are 24 items, 24 files that we're going to be bringing into here all at once. And you'll notice just in a second what it'll do is it'll build the program for you. Okay, so it's going to put them in based on the order that you select and drag them in. So if for instance you dragged by clicking on the C1A supply fan logic symbol first, it's going to put it at the top, and then it's going to take everything else from order top to bottom and put them in there. So what you really want to do is select all your options and then go back to the title. That way the title's at the very top. And then you're just going to let it build its program as it goes. It's going to drop all of the logic symbols in here in the same order that they're named. It's also going to space them out equally and kind of put them all in there nicely. And the way that these programs are built, you're going to see some bright purple pinkish logic in here. And what that's going to do is draw your attention as you're programming to the various options and things you need to configure. So let's say we didn't want to use dew point control for our economizer section. We could delete that. And then you'll also notice these are all in error right here by these red little dots. Down at the bottom, if you're familiar with Equipment Builder, this works in a similar fashion where in Equipment Builder they put a section all the way at the bottom with all of the microblocks throughout the program kind of coupled all together. We've segmented it out to make it a little bit easier to program through the means that we're developing the programs. So you'll see that the outside air dew point economizer option is not in error down here because we've removed the duplicate tag that was shown up in this section here. So what you can do also is anytime you see these little blocks down here, if they are in error, that means it exists somewhere else in the program. So you can go through and delete all the things that are showing in error after you've configured your options elsewhere, such as up here under the enable conditions. All right, so we're going to delete those. These aren't in error because we didn't have CO2 control and we don't have dew point controls, but they're kind of just filler. This is in error because it also shows up in our supply fan section right here. So we can just delete that. And you can also shrink down the space if you want by editing the box size, but we'll leave that alone for now. This one is a little bit different than what you would typically see, but it's there to kind of draw your attention to say, all right, I might have to remove one of these if I don't have that option built in. So if I wasn't doing outside airflow control, you might have to delete these items and then slide your CO2 control over just to clean that up a little bit. But we're going to have those in there, so we'll just delete the note. We'll also delete the note over here for the options. Going down the page, we don't have an outside air damper that's a minimum separate from the economizer, so we'll remove that. This is just kind of a programming note, a reminder if you're doing flow control that you need to set your maximum scale for your input on your flow so that we can properly configure our alarming for fail conditions. So you would set that, and then you can either leave this in there or not. If you don't have the information and it's going to be set out in the field, you could leave that in there just as a note. Coming down the page, this is in error similarly as before because we have that control elsewhere, so we'll remove it. Continue down the page, same kind of options here. These are both in error, so we'll remove them. We do have dehumidification, so we'll remove that. We don't have any kind of external dehumidification control, so we'll just remove this entire section down here. And in doing so, you'll notice there's some tags here, and it'll cause an error elsewhere, but that's not a big deal. We just have to deal with that up here by deleting a few items. Coming down to return air humidity, so there's two different options in here to make it easy so that you can drop the same logic symbol in and still configure it. What we've done is broken it out into trip points based off of a set point and then fixed trip points just based off of the parameter values in these blocks. So let's say we care about our off of set point because we're going to have some sort of dehumidification set point rather than just monitoring it. So we'll remove the fixed trip option, and of course we don't need the related blocks up here, the purple text, and you'll see two of the errors went away as a result. We want to keep those blocks and we'll get rid of the other ones. This is just a note so that you understand what this is used for. You have a similar function for your filter status. You have the ability to have it be manually cleared or automatically cleared. So let's just go with the auto clear, and we'll remove all the other options. Okay, again, you can shrink down the spacing to compact everything a bit on the page and clean it up a bit. But you'll notice we don't have any errors anymore, so it's that quick to build a program with some standard logic. Now you got to come back in here and maybe configure a few things, hit some switches, put some parameters in for set points and things like that, but that's the basic idea behind creating the program. I will jump briefly into the order. These blocks, they might look a little funny over on the side, but the reason they're like that is to help visually break up how the properties page is going to be ordered. So they're grouped to where these two go together, and then you come in a layer, those two go together, and then you have some other things in here. So as an example, this is just a visual indicator to show up on the properties page to help you find it. So we can jump in there to show you how to find it. Okay, so you'll notice here's the beginning of that section. Here's the actual beginning of that section to where it defines the expandability on the properties page, and then everything else is between there, and at the end you'll see the other end of it, and here's the actual end. And within that section you'll probably also spot some tables. So you see a table begin. Oop, I went too far. You see a table begin, and then you'll come down and you'll see the table end right there. And all that does is kind of line up similar parameters within that microblock to where it looks nice and organized on the properties page. So these blocks have been set up to where all of them have been kind of pre-organized for you. That's why they look a little funny, is just to visually help you understand which ones are paired together and how it's broken up. Now this one's obviously got an additional few additional blocks in there. So that's the general idea, and then when you go look at the reorder from top to bottom, you'll have it in the order you dropped them in. Okay, so you've got your kind of your revision information, and then you've got all your different sections below that, and you can see they're ordered in the way we dropped them in. So you should always have an end and then a beginning right after that, and there might be a couple that you find along the way where you've dropped in additional parts and pieces and you need to adjust things, but for the most part you should see them organized that way. So now you've got your basic application. We might say, all right, equipment application, you might say VAV HU, and if you wanted to throw in some additional notations, you could, to say like with, I don't know, preheat, chill water, etc. If you wanted to be like detailed like that. The other thing you could do is if you wanted to be specific, you could say, all right, I've got VAHU 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you're doing. You could set it up that way as well. Your file name is what you want to match the actual file name when you save it. So you might want to use something like VAHU 01. You would then copy that, save, and then you would place that inside your programs folder so that you could reference it when you're building in Site Builder. I'm just going to dump it in a delete me folder. So you'll name that so that this matches what your title for your file name is inside the file. You'll save it, and then like I said, in your case, you'll go in, you'll put it in the programs folder. And this also gives you, if you wanted to make tweaks, you could save this one, configure it all, and then rename all this, and then resave it under a new name for any modifications you made. One last option that you want to mess with is you want to be able to put some sort of date and signature on this thing. At the very least, we want to know when it was built. So we would say, what's today, 13th, and then I might even add at the beginning my initials if I wanted to sign it. So that's kind of the gist of it there. If you do have any questions, you can reach out to me. My name's Jordan Phelps. Also, if you find any errors or anything in the programming, working forward, we are in development of these, so it would be good to get any feedback as well. Thank you.